Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Wasn't Brennan Mull's presentation amazing?
It was very good.
We are so lucky to have him. Okay, awesome. You are also lucky to hear from these two next speakers, Haley Brooks and Adam McLain. I could read their bios. Haley Brooks is a rising editor, current BYU student, and voracious reader. In addition to her editing jobs at BYU, she's the current editor-in-chief of Leading Edge magazine. She spends a little too much time baking and pursuing social media. If money wasn't an object, she would love to be a mail carrier. And then Adam McLain studies writing, editing, and social media at BYU and is on his way to mastering low-budget social media tactics. Adam is a managing editor at Leading Edge, an editorial intern at the Joseph Smith Papers, and a freelance editor and publicist for self-publishing and hybrid authors. And his contact information is in his bio. I happen to know Haley and Adam pretty well because they were my managing editors at Leading Edge. I was the editor-in-chief and they were my managing editors. Of course, Adam was there way longer than me, and I don't know why he let me be editor-in-chief. And for that matter, I don't know why Haley let me, since she's far more capable than I am. And I'm sure Leading Edge is in the best hands it's ever been in. So please give a warm round of welcome to Haley and Adam.
So we just made a decision back there where I get to start this thing off. So
You get to start.
this is great. But Haley's gonna be the controller person. So Haley and I, we're doing a presentation called Social Media Connections and Strategies.
Just if you don't speak in the mic, you won't get on the video.
Oh, that's okay. We were never told that we have to do it on video. I didn't sign anything for this, you know. Oh dear, that's nice. Sorry, I got the news on my watch. It's kind of cool. I'm really gonna be self-conscious now. I think you need this, or are we just gonna like stay up here? Okay. So, all right. We're gonna introduce ourselves. After we introduce this, the topic is social media connections and strategy. We're going to be talking a lot about how you can make connections on social media, because that's what social media is all about, is connecting you to your audience personally and like as a more broader aspect as well, and also strategies on how you can go about doing those connections.
Okay. So, like Leia introduced, I'm Haley Brooks. I'm the current editor-in-chief of Leading Edge magazine. I also have 2 editing jobs on campus for BYU. I'm really into social media. I run this Twitter account for Leading Edge and a few other accounts. So that's a little bit about me.
If you can't tell, we're really nerdy. We went to Comic-Con and got these pictures this last year. It was our favorite thing. A little bit of my social media background. I cover the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages for Life, the Universe, and Everything, the local symposium for fantasy and science fiction. And then I cover the Facebook page for Leading Edge as well. And then we have our own personal accounts that are pretty well off. Yeah. Haley once got like 20,000 impressions, which is pretty good.
Church retweeted me once. It was exciting.
That's like her claim to fame right now, is the LDS Church retweeter. So with social media, we wanted to like kind of give a broad aspect of what we have when you generally talk about social media. There's always new social media coming up, and so you always have to stay on top of all that. But you don't have to be like into everything, because everyone has their own certain personal feel and personal attitude towards social media. Some people like video more than others. Some people like pictures more than others. Some people just like words, and they're like, all I want to do is words. I don't care about this freaking graphics. So we have like Twitter, which is the word focus, 140 characters. Facebook, which is more of the personal connection with your friends. It's words, video, and pictures. Instagram is just picture and video along with some comment, but like the captions, they cut off really easily. Over there on the bottom left is Reddit, which is a commenting thing where you can like up a comment, down a comment, and it's huge conversations. You can get into some pretty deep stuff there. And some pretty non-deep stuff too. It's because it's everyone just talking, and it's great. Snapchat is a very personal one-to-one picture messaging app that can be considered social media. Vine, that little V right there, are 8-second videos that you just put out, and you're like, hey, this is me, yay. There's an artwork to Vine, and you can do it well, and you can do it really not well. So there's no in between. And then Tumblr is a blogging site that a lot of people use, especially like our generation. One thing that we're focusing this presentation around is around millennials, so you can reach that audience, because we are millennials, so we figure we can talk about ourselves because we've lived ourselves.
So we're going to focus mostly on Facebook and Twitter because they're the 2 main social networking sites. So for each one we're going to kind of talk about basic strategies, what it's used for, what kind of audience you should be searching for. And Adam's going to start us off with Facebook.
Yeah. Alrighty. So on both of these, with Facebook and Twitter, we're going to talk about the purpose of each of them for Facebook and Twitter. I mean, most people know, but like we're going to talk more about the purpose that you can use it to reach millennials, and then the audience that you're looking at when it comes to millennials, and then your basic strategies to reaching that audience.
Okay, so the purpose of Facebook. So Facebook is a longer form social media, so you can give your bigger updates. You also have more space to write, so you're going to want to talk about your new books, drafts you finished, printing runs, events that you're putting on, bigger ideas. So you want to notify, again, followers of bigger things, deals. A lot of authors and publishing houses, when they do deals or sales, Facebook is the place to do it. Do not do it on Twitter so much because you can't explain as much. You also maintain a presence without being obtrusive. So it's really easy to be obtrusive in people's lives on any other social media. But, and Adam will talk about this in a minute, you're not going to be posting very often. So it's a way to keep you engaged in their lives. They're going to remember you without being all over them.
Do you got it?
No.
Okay. So with our audience, usually your audience on Facebook is a casual audience. They're not as engaged. They're just, taking time out of their day to quickly scroll. Most of you, does everyone here have a Facebook? Who does not have a Facebook? Okay, good. We don't have to give anyone the stinky eye. That's a good thing. So as you know, with your own usability, your casual looker usually isn't for your audience. They're looking for longer content because Twitter, in comparison to Facebook, has shorter content. You're also generally looking at an older age group. A lot of millennials and people younger than us are moving away from Facebook and moving more into Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, things like that, as the older people get onto Facebook finally, because we want to flip the bird to the older people, basically. And people on Facebook don't want to be bombarded by posts a lot of the times. I mean, you notice in your own Facebook feed, you'll sometimes unfollow people. I know if someone's posting way too much, I'll unfollow them. One of the personal things for me and for a lot of other people is we don't like getting the tons of, especially like our age, we don't like getting the tons of wedding announcements and things. And so I'll unfollow friends who I like because I'm tired of seeing their, I love my husband, things like that. So if you're an author, sometimes they can become tired of, oh, you're selling me your book in every single post, and they'll unfollow you, which means you've just lost that person and being able to see you. And then we feel like Facebook is more or less author-oriented and more company-oriented. It's easier to follow a company than it is to follow an author sometimes on Facebook. Just because Facebook is that person-to-person, you add a friend and you are more personal that way compared to following a big singular person in comparison to that.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some basic strategies. So the first one, how many times you should be posting. 1 to 2 times a week at most. If you are doing more than that, people are going to unfollow you. They're not going to want to like you on Facebook anymore. But at least once a month, so they still see you in your feed. They still know you're present, you're around. Some things that a lot of authors share, again, authors don't do Facebook very well, but they do book reviews. So either they're reviewing a book and giving recommendations, your fans really like that, or people who have reviewed your book, but you also don't want to toot your horn too much, so only if it's like a really, really good book review. Interviews you've done, so links to blog posts, links to podcast accounts, links to news pages, any milestones in your publishing, and then fan-created content. So if someone makes fan art, you should be reposting that because that's how you create a community. That is how you're connecting with your fans. They're celebrating this book that you wrote. You should be celebrating it too. And you should be connecting with your fans that way. So Facebook, if you do not use an image or a video in your post, people scroll right past it. And I think you guys recognize that in your own Facebook. That's just, Facebook's put a lot of research into what makes a post effective, and if it's just text, people aren't going to read it. It's best if you've created the image or the video, but if you haven't, that's fine. A lot of us don't have time to make our own images and videos. So There are some websites where you can get some pretty high quality free images if you want to do that. And then always make sure to give credit. And then lastly, on Facebook, use the event feature. If you are doing something, a book signing, an event, you should be promoting that, and Facebook's the best way to do that. I'll introduce. Okay, so we're now going to talk about Twitter, which is what Adam and I are better at. It's also easier to connect with your fans. It's probably what authors do much better. Publishing houses do this better too. I just think Twitter is way better. Okay, so it's way better. So the purpose of Twitter is that's a big hole I don't really want to get into. But so you get to open a dialogue with your readers and fans. This is a place where you can come and have conversations. It's not just, here, look at this content or look at this news. It's, I have this idea and I want you to respond to it. And readers love interacting with the authors. So if you're an author and someone replies to one of your tweets, try to reply to it or favorite it. It will make their whole life. It'll be great. Twitter helps you maintain constant contact. We'll talk about how often you should be tweeting in a minute, but much more constant than Facebook. Gives you the smaller updates because it's only 140 characters, which is a challenge, but it's also really fun. And you also get to talk about big ideas and your own opinions, not just your own content.
All right, so for the audience, generally on Twitter, you have people that are casual, but also dedicated people. Haley and I are obviously dedicated people because we love Twitter a lot. We're on it constantly and consistently. But then you have the people who only go on, like my mom finally added me back on Twitter. She finally followed me back, and she's had a Twitter for like 5 years or something. And I'm like, thanks, Mom, I love you too. So like, you know, you have the casual people, but you also have the dedicated people who are always commenting back on your posts and things like that. They're looking for shorter content, usually 140 characters, because they want that quick update, that quick snap of, oh, this is cool, that author's doing that. Oh, the author's writing right now. Cool, maybe the next book will come out. Things like that. It's generally a younger age group because, I mean, some older people are getting onto Twitter, but it's where people have moved from Facebook is onto that. Twitter's also helping with that, where they're like making it better for people to share things. For example, they just opened up where you can add a GIF or a photo without breaking out characters. So you can still write 140 characters and then have a picture, which is awesome now because then you can write just a little bit more, which you always need that little bit more. They also want constant updates from the people that they follow. They want to know exactly not exactly what's happening. They don't want to know like when you're in the bathroom or like making dinner or anything like that. But they want to know what's happening in your life as the author or as a publishing house. They also want it to be more personal. They want to know more about you and not just your book. They want to understand you as a person rather than you as author.
Okay, let's talk about some Twitter strategies. So again, on the sharing, 1 to 2 times a day. Some authors are on there all the time, like 100 plus tweets a day. Do not feel like you have to do that because that's a little insane. I'd say a good amount if you want to be pretty present on Twitter is about 8 times a day, spread throughout the day. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
About 8, yeah. So it depends on you and your audience. So if you have like 5,000 people following you, you're going to be tweeting more than if you have 200 people following you, because you don't want to be inundating them with excessive tweetage. Unless they like it.
I have over 7,000 followers, and they like to hear from me like as much as I want.
Yeah, exactly. So it all depends on your audience. You have to get a feel for everything. A lot of authors give updates on their writing. So, oh, I just finished chapter 3 in the sequel to my book, or I just wrote 3,000 words. Your fans will love that. Personal anecdotes and opinions are becoming really popular among authors and editors right now, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then we're going to talk a little bit later about services like Buffer and Hootsuite, which will schedule your posts for you so you don't have to be on Twitter all the time, which is good because I get really distracted whenever I get on Twitter, so I use that all the time. And then, like I said earlier, make sure to be interacting with people who are interacting with you. Don't feel the need to reply to everyone who replies to you because that is way too much of a time commitment. But make sure that you have some sort of constant interaction.
Sorry, I just got so.
Next, so images are much more important on Facebook than they are on Twitter. GIFs are really popular right now, and you can search, and if you go on Twitter, you can just click on GIF and search. Those will boost your posts, which are really helpful. And then feel free to share more fan content because you can just retweet it on Twitter, and then the credit is right there, so you don't have to like go back and say, oh, I got this from X source and it's X person. And then let fans know if you have events coming up, but direct it back to your Facebook or your blog or your website. This is not really the place to be talking about events.
All right. So the best thing about Twitter is the hashtags. You'll notice that some people on Facebook use hashtags. Yeah.
GIF. Can you just
Oh.
It's like a little short video. It's like a short video image, so it's like on constant loop. It's one of those constant loop images. Yeah.
And so is that easy to put on?
Yeah, so Twitter now, they've added a feature where when you're making the tweet, you can like add the photo or something. It says GIF right there. You can just click there. And then you can type in whatever, and it pulls from different websites.
Yeah, and we'll show you that after if you want to remind us. That'd be great. So hashtags, they're our favorite thing. We love hashtags. But the key thing about hashtags is you don't want to use them as much on Facebook. You want to use them more on Twitter. Hashtags don't work on Facebook as well as they do on Twitter. Sometimes they work, but like because everything on Facebook is like people have private accounts and things like that, it's not easy to connect a conversation with your post to other things because a hashtag is meant to connect you into a larger conversation. It's like if you were an English major there and you try to write a paper, you're trying to connect yourself into that larger conversation. Hashtags make it really easy. These are some of the hashtags that we found as we follow authors that a lot of authors use, or that a lot of like would-be authors also use in order to like create a community around that.
Yeah, so on Twitter, the way hashtags work is you hashtag a post, and then people can search by hashtag. So if I'm in the middle of writing and I want to see what other people are writing about, I would search am writing on Twitter. And then all the posts that have used that hashtag will come up chronologically, and people will reply and start conversations that way.
Yeah, one of the great ways to get followers is to go onto a hashtag, like go hashtag am writing, and like start liking and replying and talking with people so that you can have that conversation builder. It's like networking basically, but through your phone without having to talk to people. So it's great if you're like an introvert person because it's really easy to just type a thing to someone, go, cool, great job, you're writing, that's awesome. Hashtag am writing or something like that. You can also create hashtags, like they have the hashtag LDSPPA to talk about LDSPPA things that they're using right now. And you could see like we've added to that hashtag, Caroline's added to that hashtag, other people have in order to enter into the conversation around our conference specifically. I've created hashtags for classes. I did a hashtag, there was a joke with a friend where she had to pay for pizza. So we did hashtag Hillary must pay in order to get her to pay for pizza. She never paid for pizza. But it helped us as a class. There was only 7 of us, but we got into this conversation on Twitter that if anyone else looks at it, they may not get it or they may start laughing. So we're actually going to go through some examples of how big authors, New York Times bestsellers and award winners, I didn't look up what she's the one, that's okay, have like interacted with us, myself personally, because I really like interacting. So this is Fran Wilde. She wrote the book Updraft, which was released by Tor last year, and the sequel's coming out this year. She's been like on the Hugo nomination, I think the Nebula nomination, and all these like big awards for fantasy and science fiction. She runs a really good Twitter if you want to follow her. She interacts with a lot of people. But you can see her, I was like, hey, Fran, I just saw the paperback, it's beautiful, and I'm thinking of giving away my hardback. Just, you know, put that out there. And then Fran replied, you could actually have both, you know. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm a college student, so maybe I'll give it to my mom. And then Fran replied, and she's like, totally reasonable. Hi, Adam's mom. So she kept it very real, if you notice. She's not like being very like astute and professional in this way. She's like, hey, Adam's mom, how's it going? And then I showed that to my mom, and she was happy. Yeah. So like interacting on a personal level is really helpful. And being just yourself through that. This is another one where I was talking to a publishing house actually. So they were talking about how school was starting and like what are your favorite classics, and I was just starting this semester coming up, and you see I'm reading a lot of Poe and Doyle and feminist lit, which is awesome. And so they replied with this GIF right here. This is a GIF where it's Wonder Woman punching patriarchy the window, and she's shattering the window, which is the most beautiful thing ever, and it's my favorite GIF. I use it probably once a month. So they're like, that sounds great. What kind of feminist lit? And then they added that, and I'm like, that GIF is my favorite thing now because they were like connecting that. And then I just replied what I was reading, and then they're like, that's fantastic. And then they connected to other publishing houses in order to bring them into the conversation. So you want to just bring people into the conversation, into this thing that you're trying to talk about.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about Buffer really quickly, and I was hoping to have a laser pointer, so I apologize. So Buffer is the post scheduling service that I use for Leading Edge. So you can connect your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagram, Google+, whatever you're using, and schedule posts. So the top left here is where you're creating content. So you type out your tweet, and then you'll click Buffer, and it will go into a scheduled feed. So on the bottom left here, it will go into your Twitter account, and it will analyze when your Twitter followers are on and active on Twitter, and then it will make a scheduling post schedule based on that. So your posts will be posted when your Twitter followers are actually on. It should do that for Facebook. I just don't use it for Facebook. And then you can come over here, and it will also give you analytics. So it will tell you how many retweets. If you click on it, it'll tell you who retweeted it, likes, mentions, clicks on the content, and then the potential is how many people could potentially see this post if everyone who followed all those accounts got on. So, yeah, sure. So, just some overall strategies. Make sure you proofread everything. You will get eaten alive if you have typos in any of your social media posts. You will just, that's the end. It's over.
Or non-ironic grammar errors.
Yep, plan to spend 1 to 2 hours on social media whenever you're on. So not necessarily when you're buffering things, but when you go in to interact with people, it's a significant time commitment to do it really well. So just get ready, it's exciting. Again, constantly interact with your followers. That's how you create the conversations, that's how you create the connections. And now I'm gonna switch over to Adam.
So when you are interacting on Twitter or Facebook or any social media, remember to set boundaries for yourself, boundaries of time, like how much time you can spend, because like you don't want to be spending all your time on Twitter when you really should be writing those 5,000 words you need to finish by the end of the week, or editing that book that you need to be editing. And so like set a boundary, say, okay, I'm only going to spend an hour, and then set a timer or something like that. Also, set boundaries of who you interact with. Sometimes there's like trolls on Twitter or something who like just want to pull you out into a conversation. That's not the best one to go with. So just say, I'm not going to reply to that. And that's okay. You don't have to reply to everything. You can set boundaries on like, I'm not going to talk about those things. And also like what personal info to share, like what you're comfortable with sharing mainly. One of the key things that they talk about when people are talking publicity with authors and it comes to social media is you want to be yourself, but you don't want to be all of yourself out there. You don't want to like just say, hey, I'm on the bathroom, guys, or I'm in the bathroom or something like that. That's not cool. But yeah, set boundaries on what you want to share. Some people, for example, Brandon Sanderson, whenever he talks on Twitter about his kids, he has nicknames for them, along with like Shannon Hale and things like that. So I know in the LDS community, you have kids and things, and so make nicknames for them. I think one of Brandon's kids is Meatloaf or something like that. I don't know, he's just like, Meatloaf was playing with Legos. And so like you're able to talk about your kids without putting them out there. And so it protects them. And then also remember to be yourself and to be genuine. Sometimes you can, if you want to make up a persona for yourself, that's fine too, but also it's easier to just be you. And always ignore the haters. Like if someone's like constantly tweeting at you saying how much they hate your book, just ignore them. You can actually ignore them on Twitter where you click, hey, I'm going to ignore you. I don't like you. And it doesn't let them know. You block them. Yeah, that's the word. Muting, yeah.
But you can also block people that are true haters. It's important to do that and not feel ashamed for doing
Yeah.
that.
And also, one key thing is if you have fan accounts, don't police them. Just let them happen in a way. I think of, when we're talking about fan accounts, we mean like, have y'all heard about emo Kylo Ren? Where it's Kylo Ren tweeting, you're not supposed to show that yet. Okay, whatever. Star Wars doesn't police the emo Kylo Ren thing. It just helps them get more publicity. So if you're not policing those fan accounts, they just help you build up your publicity. And finally, our wonderful meme, haters gonna hate, hate, hate. Thank you, T-Swizzle, who is a Twitter goddess.
So really fast, before we open it up for questions, here are some accounts that if you're on Twitter are good to follow. So we have us and LDSPPA. And then we have 4 authors who do social media really well, but they all do it differently.
Do you want me to talk about?
You can do Victoria Schwab.
Okay. So I love Victoria Schwab. I was able to interview her a couple months ago. She is a newly minted New York Times bestseller who comes out with about 2 books a year, one YA and one adult. And she's a voracious writer and everything. But her thing about social media, I went to her presentation and someone asked her, like, why are you so open? Because she's very open about the depression that she feels, about the inadequacies of the publishing world. She's just a very honest person when it comes to Twitter. And she said she decided that she's found on social media there weren't enough of those, and so she wanted to be one of those. And so she's great to follow because she shares her opinion, her personal experience, and also she interacts really well with fans. She'll like your tweets and retweet you and stuff like that.
Yeah. John Green's a really great one to follow because he does other things along with the writing. So he does like vlogging and some educational videos too. So if you do other stuff, he's one to follow. Shannon Hale is a member, and she talks a lot about gender in writing and just gender inequalities in general. So if you want to talk about stuff like that, she's one to follow. And then Brandon Sanderson mostly just sticks to writing in his events. So if that's more your cup of tea, follow him.
And the reason we're sharing these is it's always good to like see what other people are doing and then take your own ideas from that. That's where we gain most of our ideas and where we've got a lot of our information for this is just from what other people do. And so it's good to just like be a little stalker in the woods,
Yep.
watching what other people do and how they do it well.
Yeah.
And then mimicking that, but in your own style.
Yeah. So that is our presentation.
Yeah.
And
Remember to follow us because we like
Yep.
being followed and we'll follow you
true.
back.
That's true.
I called you guys last night and you didn't follow me back.
Oh dear, this is
Turn
awkward.
off my replays,
Dang it.
though. Just automatically do that if you don't want to.
Sometimes we're not on it all the time.
Sometimes we're productive. We are students.
I was
so
doing homework last night. I was reading about some gender theory, so.
That's cool. So do you guys have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
I'm curious too, where do you see, I mean, this is all so new
Yeah.
in terms of, it just keeps on changing too.
Mhm.
So where do you see it going? So let's say 2 years from now, and I know in social media,
I hate
2
this
years
question.
go by.
Oh dear.
So where do you see, I mean, like you said, Facebook is kind of on the way
Yeah.
out. If you're dealing with an older audience, yes, it's still used, but
Yeah, Facebook is definitely on the way out. Google Plus, no one uses Google Plus. Don't use Google Plus. A lot of people are going to the more blogging interaction sites. So the Reddit, which you ask questions, start the conversation. The Harry Potter and the Cursed Child thread is really interesting on Reddit if you want to look that up. And then Tumblr. But Tumblr quickly turns into a black hole, so be really careful. You can go down the rabbit hole and never come out of Tumblr. It's a blogging site, and people interact kind of the same way as Reddit.
It's interesting that people are more going towards more content now, so they can actually interact with the more content and talk back and forth.
But not
through-
Facebook.
No,
Yeah.
not Facebook.
So,
what about things like Medium, and I know LinkedIn has their Pulse, and, those kinds of blogging
We don't
sites.
touch LinkedIn ourselves.
that's not true.
Not really too much.
Media-wise,
Yeah, so
That's a
Medium
good
is
question.
the
Yeah.
open more for
Yeah.
literary
Mhm.
things, and
Yeah.
then, but LinkedIn Pulse is if you're doing
right.
more business. those
I think it's just getting more diverse, if anything.
Yeah.
Like, it's not...
And the key thing about it getting more diverse is I was at another conference and someone mentioned this. You want to do the ones that you're comfortable with. Like you don't want to be on every single one because you can't handle every single one. I mean, you can't be on like Snapchat, Vine, Twitter. You can, but like that's a lot to handle if you're doing it professionally and trying to get a following. And so like you have to check every single one every day. And by the time you're done with that, 3 hours have passed and all of your writing's gone down the hill. And so it's mainly like, where was I going with that? Picking the right one for
Yeah,
you
picking the right one for you.
that you're comfortable with.
Authors usually choose 2 to 3 to do.
Yeah.
So it's usually the Facebook and the Twitter. Some authors really like Tumblr, but that's personal preference.
Instagram's getting pretty huge with
Um,
authors. It's starting.
It's
It
growing, yeah.
is. Authors and publishers don't use it as much though because they usually don't have as many images. There are certain publishing houses that are doing it now. Services like Epic Reads because they can generate content. They have people who are paid to do that. But unless you want to put in the time commitment to come up with unique images every day, probably not the way to
I feel
go.
like we should though, 'cause I feel like my audience is all on, like, if
Yeah.
I talk to anyone in my audience, say, what social media do you use? They're not on Twitter, they're
Mhm.
on Instagram, all of
Yep.
them.
Yeah, so it's
So
you also
just
want to
have
follow the
find a way
audience.
as authors
Yeah.
to get to that audience.
Yeah, for sure.
But I
Yeah.
haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, it's,
When you let us, when you do, let us know.
let us know when you break the master
We have a
code.
quick question back there, and then we can hop up here.
Do you mind if I add a comment to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to say that a lot of social media depends on where your audience is at.
Mhm.
So if you have a lot of audience on Instagram, that would be a good
Yeah.
account to have. Also, another social media platform that's really starting to grow is Snapchat. So
Yeah.
if your audience is there, that's something to look into too.
Yep. With Snapchat, you have to be very comfortable with being yourself and sharing a lot of personal information though. So if you are not comfortable with that, do not do Snapchat. And I know a lot of authors are not, so don't feel pressured into doing that.
Yeah.
But
Because if you're not comfortable with the social media you're using, you're not going to do it well.
yeah. So,
But thank you for that comment. That was really good.
mhm.
Do we have any more questions, comments?
Joe?
We built in a lot
So
of.
why Buffer over Hootsuite? Are
I-
there better
Personal
things about
preference.
Buffer? I
This is
think
personal
Hootsuite, I
preference.
like it, but
I
is
have
there
actually
more?
never used Hootsuite because there was a problem with our account.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, I really like Buffer. It's very easy to use. I've never used Hootsuite, so if you want to talk
Is it on
about
your
that.
desktop too, or is it just like?
Hootsuite and Buffer are both on desktop.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now with Buffer, you can do Instagram from your desktop, I guess,
Yeah.
That's
mhm.
a lot.
which is nice
Yeah.
because then you can edit a photo easier compared to on your phone.
Yeah.
Which is nice because like Instagram's always been just your phone, and so it's been hard to crack that way. But it's becoming, I guess, more.
More desktop.
Is Buffer paid or is there a free version?
So
There's a
I
free.
use the free version. It limits you 15 posts in your buffer, so you're gonna have to be doing that about once a day.
Does it
But
limit how many social media accounts you can have?
No. Mm-mm. Yeah.
Hootsuite,
So
I think, is 3.
oh,
Free,
okay. Yeah.
So Buffer, there we go.
Buffer. And Buffer's really easy to use, so I really like it.
And there's another one. There's a local Utah one that does really well. They
Yeah.
teach it in the communications school here. I don't remember what it's named.
I
It's
don't
like
remember what
Blue
it's called either.
something. But I had a friend talking about it who took a social media class. But that one you have to pay for all the way. And if you don't have a huge following / a huge paycheck coming in, you probably don't want to pay for that.
Yeah. And then just another quick note with the Buffer and the Hootsuite, you still need to be getting on Twitter or Facebook so you can have the interaction. You just don't have to be on there to post. You don't have to be like, okay, I have to get on at 10 and 11:15, and because that's just a big time waster.
Yeah, when I was running a Twitter account for something, I was doing like tweets to like build up a conversation with people, like using hashtags and a certain amount of tweets, and then going in and interacting personally with other people. And so like I had my Twitter strategy in a sense. It was like posting scriptures with hashtags in order to reach out to people and get followed by other people. But then I was also tweeting personally, not personally, but like professionally from
Yeah.
at different times.
Yeah.
And so that really helped. And that was a strategy that I used.
So if you are, and I don't want to say different personas, but let's say, you know, you're professional, you're doing, you know, you have this professional job, but on the other hand, you're also writing nonfiction, you know, you're writing fiction and nonfiction, so you have two different personas.
Mhm.
Do you create different personas, or do you keep yourself as the same person but with two different kinds of tweets? I mean, what happens if you are tweeting two different kinds of things? You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? Does that kind of dilute the?
So you
way
have
people
you have
think?
two options like that if you feel like you lead two kind of separate lives, have two separate
Right.
personas. One is to just have one and just be standard and just run the one account, just be you on that one account.
Okay.
Or you can create two separate accounts, but one's probably gonna have to be under a separate name.
And you have to have a separate email account.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's probably easier to just do one, and the people will probably still follow you anyway, to be completely
Yeah.
honest.
How often do you, I mean, if you just said, okay, 1 hour in the evening, boom, 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 is that enough to be able to keep
Yeah.
current?
Yeah,
At the very minimum, yeah.
yeah.
So you're saying usually you need
If
more?
you use it throughout the day, that's usually better because people get on at different times of the day.
So the
Yeah.
way I run the leading edge Twitter, at least, I buffer things, and I haven't been so great about this, but I buffer things, and I have 4 posts a day, I think, is what we shoot for usually. And then they post throughout the day, and then I get on 3 times a day to just check and see the retweets and the replies so I can interact with those. But I limit myself to 5 minutes. So,
Yeah.
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 On Twitter,
Uh-huh.
how many hashtags should you use per post?
No more than 3. because after that, you're using valuable
Yeah.
character space, and people probably aren't searching for that many hashtags.
Yeah, because when you're making a hashtag, you want to enter into the conversation, so you want to say something important. And so if you use 3, you've already used like 50 characters, and so you only have 90 characters to make your point, which isn't that good.
How integrated do you like to have your social media? Because for a lot of
We're gonna get this question. Yeah.
only because I kind of feel like, I know everyone says Facebook's going out, but I think that's a quick assumption, only because Facebook is the only place where everything can be aggregated. For example,
It's true.
like my daughter's crazy about Tumblr, but that's because she's an artist and that's
Yeah.
where all her community is. But I was like, oh, well, I'll look at Tumblr. I'm like, well, if I use it for my illustrators, can you create an event there? She's like, no, so I'm still gonna need Facebook. Okay,
Yeah.
well, can you do this there? No. Okay, well, I'll still need this
Yeah.
then. So I feel like everything can come back. So how do you feel about, like, suppose I have all these accounts,
Okay.
if they repost into Facebook, is that good or bad?
You probably don't want to be too integrated.
Okay.
I think Facebook is more of a, way I was explaining it last night, it's more of a billboard or your personal website. So it's more administrative
Yeah.
than the others.
And so like, there's people who like connect their Twitter to their Facebook, but then if they
Do
use
not
their
do that.
Twitter 20 times a day, they're posting on Facebook 20 times a day, and that gets annoying on your news feed if you see like 20 things from the same person in a row, because you usually like variety in your Facebook news feed. And it's like, it's not the best to always have them integrated like that, but if you're pulling things over and making your Facebook your home base, as like everything else is like, you're reaching out to different things, and that's good, because then someone can just come to your Facebook and do that. And so in a sense, it's like your web page, or like the new thing for a web page.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, I know people don't like to be inundated by one message, they like variety.
Yeah.
But in Facebook, where did they get the idea that you should only post once or twice a week, when the algorithm itself just won't, it won't put you in a news feed if you have, like, if you have posts too close together, or if you
Yeah.
have too many posts, like, how, I don't know, I guess it limits your reach, so that's
Yeah.
important. But at the same time, if people are used to coming to you as a community, it segregates.
Yeah, so it's mainly dependent on like your audience for
Yeah,
that.
that's another-
We're thinking like 1 to 2. We're thinking more because most people at LDSPPA aren't like New York Times bestsellers, I don't think.
Got it.
And so like if you only have an audience of 50 people who are following you right now, you don't want to post every hour like Tor.com does, where they create new content every hour and it's newly posted, and so they can do that. But they have followers of like 1 million. So like dependent on your audience. We probably should have started with a
Yeah,
disclaimer
a
there
disclaimer.
saying your audience is key, follow them, and these are just like ideas on how to grow that audience.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think right now, just at least for the next 5 minutes or so, Facebook Live, I feel like if you're doing Facebook Live posts, I've noticed the reach on those posts. I have been using it for a client, and I feel like because Facebook's trying to launch Facebook Live and make it cool, if you do a Facebook Live broadcast post, your reach will be way bigger than on a
Yeah.
normal post. And I don't know how much longer that'll work in the algorithm, but right now, Facebook Live's kind of the way to get in front of everybody fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't just spontaneously do Facebook Live. Let your fans know that, oh, at
Yeah.
10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm going to be answering questions. So why don't you submit some?
It can get annoying to
but
get that
you're-
notification that someone's live, and you're just like, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you're like, I missed that too.
Yeah,
That's the
so-
other thing.
Yeah.
Cool. We are out of time. We're gonna stay around for a little bit if you have personal questions for us, or like one-on-one questions. But
See gifts.
Personal question.
a personal question. Okay.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to talk to you and give you a high five because I proofed one of your books. But anyway, huh? Uh-huh. Yeah. That was fun. Anyway, thank you so much. It was fun.
Yep.
Do we end with any video, guys?